What's going on, everybody? Good morning, good evening, wherever you are, and whatever time it is, and welcome back to yet another video with your man, Immersiaholic. And ladies and gentlemen, we have a very special video for today. Today, we are getting an inside little preview look into the units, at least some of the units that will be coming in the new 1.2.8 update for the Divided Impera overhaul mod for Total War Rome 2. That's right. Your man Cam from the DEI modding team has gone completely out of his way to be super generous and share and categorize even the screenshots that you'll be seeing shortly for some of the new upcoming units. In fact, we'll have a total of 12 units to look at today. So today we're going to look at the visuals of the units, and basically I'm going to have a little mini discussion for each single unit on what kind of stats I would expect from a unit that looks like this, plus maybe the role of that particular unit. However, I do not have any hard facts about these units except for two things. One, we have their English variant names, and two, we also have the factions that they should belong to, at least for most of them, except for one unit in particular. So if you are as excited about the new upcoming update for DEI as me, and you really want to have a nice juicy look at some of these awesome looking units, then stick around and enjoy. Before we do get started though, I do just want to again thank Cam very much for going out of his way to share these screenshots in such a helpful manner to me. He actually gave them to me along with the faction information stuff. He does post these images on the DEI Discord, which I will be linking down below, in addition to their official Facebook group, plus the DEI YouTube channel, plus Cam's YouTube channel as well. So please do go down into the description. There is helpful information down there for you to get access to mods of other videos I do, or in this particular case, to get connected with the DEI team and community, so that way you do not miss out on any updates and extra information coming out behind the scenes from people like your man Cam, who often does actually share information on what's coming and screenshots like these. So in saying that, full credit for all of these pictures goes to Cam. These are not my pictures. This is not even my reshade. This is his insanely gorgeous looking reshade. I'm super jealous of Cam. Cam, send me a preset, please. Nah, that just looks amazing. I love how good he set up his game. But yeah, full credit goes to Cam for these pictures. In addition, he also received help from user Maga Cyrene, Ritterflow, and of course, your boy, the Kingpin of DEI Dresden, in setting up these units for the upcoming update. So of course, a massive thanks to them, and of course the entire DEI team for continuing development of DEI after all these years and giving us the amazing historical and immersive experience that we're allowed to have because of DEI. But anyway, without any further ado, ladies and gentlemen, let's check out the brand new units that we can expect in the 1.2.8 update for DEI. So first off, we have one unit for the Averni that we're going to check out, and that is the Averni Champions. That's right, we have an elite swordsman unit coming into the Averni. I feel like this is quite fitting because they're kind of lacking swordsmen. The Averni typically, in my experience, are associated more so with having just lots of spears. There is a couple units of swords, but they're definitely not, say, like the Germans who have a lot of sword units, or the Belgae/Nervii of the north. So this is really exciting to see a unit like this. They look pretty heavily armored, so I'm expecting a good high 25 to maybe low 30s armor rating for this unit, maybe even up to 38, possibly. Even though half of the unit here is kind of half naked, and the other half is in chainmail armor, typically when you see a unit like that in DEI, the unit statistic overall should have that armor rating of the chainmail there. It should, in theory. But just do keep in mind, I have no specific details on the statistics of these units. This is just purely speculation from these pictures. We're having a discussion here, and so that's all I can do. So do take what I say with a grain of salt. But this is officially how the units will look, so we should be fairly accurate in our assessment, or at least I hope I will be. But anyway, obviously they're a swordsman unit, so they're not going to have much armor-piercing damage, although they'll probably have very high melee attack. And they have some solid shields to help them in their defense as well. So a fantastic looking unit, as are all of these units. I'll say that a lot, but just too bad. You're going to have to suffer with me in enjoying these glorious looking units. But yeah, the Averni Champions are looking very badass, and I think they'll be a nice addition to the Averni roster. Next up, we have the Bosporan Kingdom. Now, they have quite a few more units compared to the Averni coming in. First off, we have the Bosporan 4-axe infantry. Now, these guys are a swordsman unit again, although a couple of the men in this picture are using axes, so I'm not sure if that will actually contribute to the statistics of the unit, or maybe it's just for these couple men in particular. There are units in DEI right now, actually, that have axes and swords as a combination, although the entire unit as a whole, statistically, doesn't really have any armor piercing damage, so it could just be a visual aesthetic that they have axes. I'm not sure. Hopefully they do have some armor piercing though, because that would be fun, and I always like things that are a little bit different. And speaking of different, these guys have that really nice nomadic kind of art style and clothing that they're wearing, combined with the Greek style of warfare using 4-axe infantry. So these guys look very heavily armored. I would expect these guys to basically fit in with the rest of the 4-axe infantry, but stand out due to their visuals, so I'd expect them to fit in statistically. I mean, very awesome looking unit though. We then also have Bosporan thorax spears coming into the mix. Super heavily armored looking. Their chainmail looks amazing. It's literally glowing into our eyes. It kind of looks like they have fish scales almost. They have some very nice oval style shields, and they're going to be thorax spears, which are always badass and generally an excellent addition to any army that you need. But I don't have too much to say on these units besides I'm assuming it's going to function like a typical thorax spear unit should, which is basically being a heavily armored, kind of slow moving but still solid spear unit to help aid your cavalry in winning the cav battle on the flanks. Then we also have some Bosporan Therios spears being added to the roster. Typically with things that are under the Therios category, I'm not too impressed with statistically speaking, although Therios spears in general can be extremely helpful as they're quite fast compared to other spears, and they'll definitely help out your cav win their cavalry fights on the flanks. These guys look pretty badass, and in fact they kind of look mainly more barbarian than Bosporan, so I wonder if they're going to come from a lower tier population in the Bosporan Kingdom potentially. So that would be really interesting to have your Therios spears come from a different level. If that is the case, it could also just be that this picture shows just like a specific barbarian section of the unit. But anyway, looking very cool, and always love to have more units in the roster. And then we come to the last unit of the Bosporan Kingdom, known as the Late Lancers. Now these guys are looking very heavy with their armor, although their horses aren't armored, so I'm assuming the armor rating might not be too high, probably in the good solid mid to high 30s. They do have helmets though, so that does help their armor rating go up a bit, but I am noticing that there is no shields shown, so that is going to mean that they have a very low melee defense. And of course they have lancers, so these guys are going to be shock cavalry. They're going to charge into the rear of the enemy, and then you're going to want them to get the hell out as quickly as possible, because these guys are almost certainly not going to have a very good melee defense, at least not from what I'm seeing here. Fantastic looking unit though, and I love the red cloaks, very, very nice touch. And then we move on to the next faction, which is receiving quite a lot of units, which is Kolchis. That's right, Kolchis is getting a bit of an overhaul here, and we see it immediately with the Chalibes pikes here, or Chalibes, however you want to say it, Calibes. I'm just going to go with how it's spelled, Chalibes. These guys are looking fairly solid, although not too heavily armored. They have that kind of quilted style of armor rather than the hectic chainmail. But then they do have pads on their legs as well. I believe it's called greaves. And then they have helmets, so their armor rating should be in the 20s somewhere. But they do not have any shields whatsoever that I can see, so that means that their melee defense is going to be a little bit lower than normal, and they will be very susceptible to arrow fire and skirmisher fire in general, so be very careful with them. And I'm not even sure if those pikes are actually sarissa length. It's kind of hard to tell in the pictures, but it's possible that these guys are just a kind of light pike units, so you might want to be careful in putting them in melee against other pike units. They may get demolished quite easily. Then we move on to the Chalib swordsmen. Now these guys have a very cool looking sword that's quite crooked, almost like a little bit of a boomerang on some of them, which is always cool to see. Very nice helmets as well. I really like that style. It's very unique. It's almost kind of like having a turtle on their head there. But they don't really have chainmail. It's kind of more of a leathery, possibly quilted style fabric. I'm not really sure the technical term on that kind of cuirass, but basically these guys are probably going to have a mid armor rating of the low 20s, maybe mid 20s at most, in my opinion. Maybe even down in like the teens, like 15 or 18 armor. But I know they do have the the leg coverings and the helmet. So I'm expecting an armor rating of around 20 something for these guys. And because they do have those curved swords though, they may have quite a solid armor piercing damage benefit, possibly. But even if they don't, they're probably going to have a very good melee attack because those swords are just looking lethal. And if your weapon looks cool, then by the laws of warfare, you should be dealing a lot of damage with it, right? I'm pretty sure that's how warfare works. But it is worthy of noting that they do only have a fairly small shield, so I'm expecting their melee defense to be quite low. So do be careful of that. Or at least make sure you do double check that before you start using the unit in certain situations. Moving on though, we then have the Kolchian hoplites. That's right, they get a very cool hoplite unit here. Now these guys are looking quite solid. Massive shields, just like any hoplite unit really. Good helmets. They have their cuirass on again. A little bit of leg protection, although not as much as the previous unit. These guys are looking very professional though, and I really like it. They even have some very badass cloaks in there as well. And you can just see the blending of the cultures here. This is definitely the Caucasian, quote-unquote, barbarian style of helmets and whatnot, combined with the Greek style of warfare with spears and shields, and of course the uniform. And some of the cloaks as well are looking pretty Greek, so very, very nice looking unit. Can't wait to see that in action. I'm expecting that to be a very solid mid-tier hoplite, maybe even a high tier. But yeah, we'll have to wait and see. And next up we go to the Kartli, and they have the Sword Masters unit being added to their roster. A very, very badass looking unit. It looks incredibly armored. Very nice chainmail on there. And then we can even see some of the men in this unit are actually dual wielding their swords. What the hell is that? I don't even know if I've ever seen an animation for that in Rome 2. That's pretty friggin' insane. I love the look of that. I mean, hopefully it works out nicely and they look pretty cool when they're using them. But just wow, isn't that impressive? The bronze style like coloring coming off these units. These guys are badass, and then the details on the shields are just, oh man. They're just, wow. That looks really, really incredible. I can't believe that. Very nice details. These guys are looking very nicely armored too. Definitely worthy of the name Swordmaster. I expected an insanely high melee attack for these guys, although I would expect no armor piercing and the melee defense to be kinda low, especially with only some of the units having small shields. So yeah, we gotta see how those statistics do come out. Then we jump over to the west and we check out Massalia. Massalia is having the Royal Guard unit being added to their roster. These guys are looking very, very unique. Usually when you have a high tier hoplite unit, you're expecting a lot of purples and reds and very flamboyant Hellenistic colors and uniform. And these guys, they're actually looking very barbarian, which is really cool. I mean, they still have that Greek flavor with some of the symbolism on their shields and on their pieces of armor and whatnot. But then they're wearing basically like Celtic style clothing. So these guys fit perfectly into the Massalian roster, I feel, where we're getting a look at basically Greek people who are living in Gaul and are adopting the Gallic style of clothing and warfare, combining it with their own warfare, which is of course Greek hoplite warfare. So just wow, what a friggin' unique unit this is. And we're seeing some very nice cloaks as well. These guys are not Gauls in disguise, but they are Greeks combined with the Gauls to give you the incredibly unique faction that is Massalia, and I really can't wait to see just how good these units are. And it looks like they're going to be very high tier, and in fact very worthy of the name Royal Guard. They have a lot of armor there, big shields, solid spears, just like any solid Greek hoplite. So wow, just a super impressive unit. I'm sure a lot of you guys can't wait to use this unit yourself. And then we come to the second last faction, which is the Saba. That's right, they are getting the Sabaean champions, an elite sword unit, looking extremely tough, very elite looking. However, their armor is kind of looking a little lackluster. I mean, not visually. Visually it looks stunning, but what I mean to say is that their armor rating is probably not going to be as high as the other units that we've seen today. At least just judging based on the appearances here. I'm expecting a low to mid 20s. I mean, probably more so a low 20 armor rating, maybe even lower than that. And their melee defense is probably not going to be amazing because those shields there's quite a few of them that are fairly small looking, so even that, it's probably going to be around 7 or 8 in melee defense, which isn't terrible, but it can definitely make them get killed off a little bit faster than what you might expect. But obviously, when you're getting elite units like this, you're expecting high morale, very high melee attack, especially with swords like these. They look really badass, although they're quite short with their swords, so that's noticeable. But then these guys also do have helmets on every single man just about, so their armor rating should be still fairly solid, as will most of these units, because the majority of them are basically high tier elite units. We've only had like a couple units that are mid tier, and these champions are definitely belonging in the elite to high tier category. I'm just thinking that compared to the Greek or Celtic champions, for example, they're not going to be as heavily armored, unfortunately, and that's just kind of the lay of the land, and that's how it's going to be for units from the Arabic factions, unfortunately. But then we finally come down to the last faction, which is the Iberians. At least that's what I've been told so far. I'm not entirely sure which Iberian faction these guys will be going to. It shouldn't be the Lusitani. If anything, it should be the Aravaci or the Editani, or maybe even a combination of both. But of course, like all things about this video, all of these units are subject to change, so take that with a little bit of a grain of salt. But anyway, we have the late heavy infantry belonging to the Iberian factions, and this unit is looking like the Iberian answer to the Roman Legionnaire. These guys have excellent chainmail covering the majority of their body. They all have very nice helmets as well. Decent shields, although they're still a little bit small, but I'm comparing that, to be honest, to like Roman units or Greek units. These barbarian style factions generally have smaller shields, and it's shown here. So that will hurt their melee defense a little bit, but these guys should have very solid armor, probably 28 to mid to low 30s, basically like a Roman Legionnaire. That's what I'm expecting. They even have a Pila javelin that you can see in one of these pictures, so that's always going to help them out in a one-on-one against other melee infantry units. And these guys, basically, they just look very badass. It looks like it's going to be a more mid to late game unit that you'll be getting, but it should be fulfilling the role of holding your main battle line as a sword unit. At least that's how I'm picturing it. I doubt it's going to have any guerrilla abilities like many of Iberian units, so I wouldn't hold my breath on that, just because it's so heavily armored and whatnot. But I mean, it's possible. It might be fitting to the faction, and the Iberians do need all the help they can get, in my opinion. They're one of the weakest groups of factions, at least culturally speaking. They're among the weakest, I believe. So hopefully these guys turn out to be badasses, and they'll be very useful in your armies. And of course, they just look really, really solid. I love the visuals of them. A lot of variety in the faces, the beards, the helmets, the shields. Like, you just can't get this amount of high quality work anywhere, and the DEI team delivers every single friggin' time. It's unbelievable. But anyway, ladies and gentlemen, that is it. That is the last of the units that I have to show you guys. Once again, thank you so much to my man Cam for helping me out and sending me these pictures. Just to reiterate, all credit goes to him for them. I'm merely just showcasing these guys to you all. If you would like to know more about the upcoming DEI update, I will link a video down below where you can go check out my preview of the preview notes that the DEI team released, where I talk about what is confirmed coming and what's potentially coming, so that way you don't miss out and you know what to expect. And of course, I'll be linking all of the DEI team socials and Cam's YouTube channel as well down below, so please go down, be sure to get involved and offer your support in any way you can to the modding team and the greater community. It's a large community, very friendly, whether you're a newer casual player or whether you're a hardcore fan of DEI or just roam to get yourself involved. But anyway, ladies and gentlemen, thank you all so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I shall see you in the next one.